going on, party people? It's your friendly neighborhood youth pastor, and we are in a series called Atypical. It's all about families, and this is part one of a two-part video with the title, Not So Typical Families Pray for Each Other. You ready? Here we go. When it comes to our family, who defines what typical really is? Because sometimes we let other people define what normal even means to us. But like we said last week, no matter what kind of family you come from, no family is typical. Your family is already atypical. But what if God is calling you to be even more atypical than what you already are? Every family has imperfections, problems, and struggles. But typical families either try to hide them or they don't deal with them at all. Atypical families invite God to come into their imperfections, struggles, and problems. Like we said in the last videos, no family is too simple or too complex to be used by God. Any family can be atypical, but the question is, how? Alright, so when I was a teenager, I used to sneak my parents' car out of the garage. I was so smart, I had it all figured out. I'd put the car in neutral, and then our driveway sloped down, so then I would just kind of ease down the driveway, and then when I got on the street, I'd turn the car on, and boom, I'd be on my way. The only problem with that is that my parents' bedroom was right above the garage. So we had a garage door opener, which obviously they could hear, and then B, okay, so it slopes down. How do you get back in the driveway and in the garage? So I had to have the car running to do that, which made a lot of noise. So needless to say, I got caught. However, my mom never actually said anything to me. I only realized this like years later. You know what my mom used to do? She used to pray. I found out years later that my mom would pray for me every week. She met with another mom, and they just prayed for us. You know, my mom could have been so mad. She could have grounded me. She could have yelled at me. She didn't. She just prayed. And I gotta tell you, I feel like a lot of the times I probably was kept safe or didn't get in a lot of trouble was probably because of the prayers of my mom. And when I asked her, like, what did she pray? It wasn't these big, elaborate prayers. It was just, you know, Lord, keep my son safe. Keep him out of trouble. Like just simple little breath prayers like that. And at some point, every family is going to go through some sort of difficulty or struggle or tension. Your family might be going through that right now. Typical families either try and hide and pretend these problems don't exist, or they struggle to try and figure them out on their own. But atypical families, they know that they can't handle these problems. They're too big. They know that they need God's help. In the last videos, we looked at the very first family, Adam and Eve. And we saw how in a few short chapters, it went from paradise, literally, to disaster with Cain and Abel. But we also saw that God is such a good God that he rescued and he redeemed them, and he used this same broken, not perfect family for Jesus. Jesus comes from this family. Today, I want to introduce you to another family. So you know about Adam and Eve. This is a few generations later. A guy comes along and his name is Abraham. You may have heard of Abraham. He's a really important person in the Bible. He's really important because of the promise that God gave to Abraham. But today we're going to look at Abraham and his nephew, Lot. Like typical families, they fought. So, you know, like any typical family, you know, it was getting so bad that it was like it got to a crisis point. And we're going to look at the story that talks about what happens when they were fighting. Hey, where'd I get this Bible from? So we're going to look at Genesis chapter 13, verses 1 to 13. Abraham and Lot. So Abraham went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abraham had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abraham's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at the time. So Abraham said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders or mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Lot looked around, and he saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set towards the east. The two men parted company. Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. So as you can see, Abraham and Lot were like families today. They fought. In fact, they fought a lot. You get it? Because Abraham fought a lot, like many times. But then Lot's name is Lot. So then Abraham fought a lot, like a guy named Lot. Pretty funny, right? So we're going to get back to Lot in a second. But I want us to look at Abraham so that we could see how atypical his family really was. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, where he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried to the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so that you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they said, "do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to the servant, who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under the tree. "Where's your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There, in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent which was behind them. Abraham and Sarah were already old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." We'll stop there for now. So Abraham and Sarah were really old and they didn't have kids, but then these messengers visited them and told them that they were going to have a baby. Imagine your grandma telling you that she's going to have a baby. You'd probably be concerned about her mental state. But that's how atypical Abraham's family was. In the next video, we're going to talk about how Abraham prayed for Lot and the difference that made. Because not so typical families often pray for each other. And it makes a huge difference. That's our time for this video. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. See you next time. Hey, where'd I get this Bible from? Where'd it go?